Good afternoon. I'm Chair Will Hornaday. I'd like to welcome you to the January 2026 Historic Resources Commission. The HRC is a quasi-judicial body that's governed by North Carolina general statutes and the City of Asheville Unified Development Ordinance and Buncombe County Ordinance. We are authorized to hear requests for certificates of appropriateness for alterations, demolition, new construction, and other work within the historic districts, or for the alteration and demolition of historic landmarks and other duties, including preliminary review of subdivisions as specified in the ordinances for the HRC. I'll now ask Commissioner members and staff to introduce themselves. Haley, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Haley Mahoney with Planning and Urban Design and here to assist in the interim with the HRC at Putnam.
Alex Cole, I'm the HRC staff liaison.
Matt Holloway, legal.
Residential construction.
Will Hornaday from Albemarle Park.
Celeste Gorman, Interior Design.
From Montfort.
Jenny Bowen, Buncombe County Special Collections.
Amy Garst, background in architecture.
Leslie Humphrey, Montfort Neighborhood.
Thank you all. We'll now consider the minutes from last month's meetings. The minutes include finding of fact and conclusion of law. Are there any corrections? I had a question on mine. If there are any other questions? If I recuse myself, should that be in the minutes? It said unanimous on 71 Starnes last. If it does need to change, that's it. And otherwise, is there a motion to approve?
I motion to approve the December minutes with the amendment of recusal in the vote for Starnes.
Perfect. 71 Starnes.
71 Starnes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mays. Commissioner Mays? Great. We'll now begin the, wait, is that it? No, I gotta swear people in. We'll now begin the evidentiary hearings for the items listed on the agenda. As a quasi-judicial proceeding, the HRC is not setting policy, nor are we soliciting public opinion on the desirability of an application. The HRC hears and considers evidence presented and applies the standards set forth in the standards for the specific historic district or landmark for that application. The HRC must make its decision upon competent material and substantial evidence to determine the facts of the hearing. The HRC will use judgment and discretion to apply the standards contained in the relevant standards to the facts. The commissioners in voting for an item will not have a fixed opinion, not susceptible to change, have a conflict of interest, or engage in ex parte communications regarding the application. This rules for speaking. Two things I forgot to say a minute ago. If you haven't already, and if there's a book over there, sign in a second, or when you have time today. It helps for when it gets transcribed. This meeting is open to the public, but participation is limited to interested parties who wish to comment or give testimony regarding the proposal. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and how they relate to the historic district standard, not personal preference or opinion. Witness must swear or affirm their testimony. At this time, I'm going to administer the oath for all folks who are going to talk. So if you're going to speak tonight, please stand up and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the information presented, that you present during the Certificate of Appropriateness or Preliminary Subdivision Approval before the Historic Resources Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? All right, thank you. Now we're going to move on to our first public hearing item. First, we're going to continue old business. Is there a motion to continue 52 Cumberland to February?
It was already continued to February.
All right. We're not making a motion then. That's it.
I also forgot I wasn't paying attention.
Do
when
you
did
solemnly
so.
swear or affirm that the information you present during the hearing or certificate of appropriateness shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hornaday, and members of the commission. I'm going to try to navigate this new mic setup as best I can, but let me know if you can't hear me. So we're going to start with the 123 West Chestnut item that was carryover from the last month. This item, as you recall, is for an accessory structure at a parcel that's on the corner of West Chestnut Street and Chestnut and Cumberland Alley. It's an existing two-story primary structure. I did listen to the minutes from last go-around. It sounded like there was a little questioning around how do we interpret the standards for accessory structures and coming up with the comparative number. Is that supposed to be quantitative versus just looking at it from a form perspective? And the answer is we've always looked at it as both. We look at the square footage calculation and compare those two things, but we also look at the overall building heights, overall form, the design. Those things are all like work together, and it is somewhat subjective. So it's not necessarily the quantitative number is not necessarily the end-all be-all. It's just part of the factual information that we share with the commission members whenever we're looking at these types of proposals. So the plans really are the same, except for I did want to ask Mr. Nicholson to clarify on a couple of things. Lost my sticky note. Just some minor things, really. It looks like on the revised plans that we received, the garage doors facing the alley are a little bit different in the drawing. So I just want to make sure that we understand, like, do we have the correct spec? Is this drawing correct versus the other one? Just want to make sure we're clear on that. And then the other thing is super minor. We have the lighting specs included, which is great, but we don't have the exact fixtures identified, and we don't know where they're going to be on the building. So we just need to have that updated, and those can be condition items if we need a new garage door spec and we need the lighting fixtures identified specifically. The applicant, since the last meeting, per the discussion, did submit some models for you all to look at. There's a folder in there for you if you want to look. I think there's probably 8 or so different modeling images, but I just grabbed a few to include in my slide deck. So I think this really does help to illustrate the relationship between the two structures a little better than just the static elevation drawings and floor plan. So I honestly, even though it is, a decently sized square footage wise accessory structure, I think that this helps me feel comfortable that it is kind of in scale. It seems to be in scale with other structures along that alley as well. I know there was some conversation, just to clarify too, in terms of like how we look at ADU size versus accessory structure size, just even for the discussion of this item and for future. There's the underlying zoning that talks about ADU size, which is either 70%, if it's a detached ADU, it's 70% or 800 square feet, whichever is lesser of the two of the primary structure. That's just the way that our zoning staff interprets that, is that they only use the heated square footage count. That's what counts towards the ADU size. When we're talking about accessory structures from a design review standpoint, we're talking about the entire structure. It doesn't above ground. We're not talking about whether or not it's heated or not, because we're looking at the form, right? We're not just talking about whether it's in one floor or not. It's the whole structure. So I just wanted to clarify that for today and for future accessory structure review. But anyways, I think that, like I said, I think that the models help me feel a little more comfortable. And the other thing that maybe we could talk through if we wanted to get really in the weeds is, I don't think I didn't include a good photo from this side, but I think the way that the foundation is exposed on the front and sides of this house, if you're stepping down on Cumberland or on West Chestnut Street, I think it also helps kind of give it this more height within the landscape. whereas the accessory structure, you know, has very little exposed foundation wall on the back side of it. And I think also too, it's not like we have never really like gotten in the weeds on this either, but we could talk about the, you know, what's within the roof, what's within the attic space that probably isn't included in the, you know, square footage calculation in a property card. I don't know what that number is, but it's probably just the dimension of the rectangle if we're just talking about the floor area. So, but I'm interested to hear if y'all had, it's a little bit hard to tell whether there were people who had concerns about the size of the structure last time, or if it was more so the concerns were like not feeling confident about how to interpret the standard.
I think, when we looked at it the last time, it was, we were trying to figure out which rules we were needing to follow. And the definition of the massing, we were talking about whether it was the square footage, the footprint, times the, you know, multiplied by the height, or whether it was the heated space. And what could you remind me what you said, that the zoning department says ADU or accessory structure could be 800 square feet, or what? What's the other?
70% of the
70.
overall, yeah,
70% of the main house?
yes, whichever is less. But 800 square feet is the maximum.
Uh-huh.
So, but that's just for the heated 80, like the actual dwelling unit area. Like if it's above a garage like this one is, the zoning staff, for the purposes of looking at the underlying zoning, do not use that. So it could be more than 800 square feet total, like this structure is. But for our purposes, like I said, we're looking at everything that's above ground as it relates to the portion of the primary structure that's above ground, if that makes sense.
I think what the language that got discussed the most was just this 30% of the scale of the main house in the guidelines.
Right, and like I said, I couldn't tell you where that came from. I just know that the existing standards were created in 2015, like right before I started with the city.
Okay.
And they were actually made more restrictive than what was in place previously. I kind of was just on the periphery of this when I was just finishing my master's degree, and I was kind of got a little bit sucked into it when I was volunteering here, but I tried to stay out of it because it sounded pretty contentious. But it's my understanding that there were a couple of structures that had gotten built that were accessory structures that were pretty big, like two-story structures with like 3-car garages, that kind of thing, and that was of concern to some people in the neighborhood, and so the standards were amended to make them more restrictive to the story and a half, and then that's when I think the 30% thing got thrown in there. And I don't know how they intended that to be interpreted, but the way that Stacy Merton, my predecessor, kind of handed it off to me was like, again, we're looking at the quantitative number as the 30%, right? Because that's easier to understand in a ratio standpoint, but it's then you also are got to factor in the site and the form and all those things, the massing and all those, the building heights and all those things together to kind of mash them up to look at a holistic picture versus just a hard number, so.
I have a totally unrelated comment, but if you go back to the picture, and if there was other massing discussion, maybe we should hear that first. And if you go back to the picture that just shows the schematic, or no, not the model, the imagery for the building, what it's gonna look like when it's finished. There you go, yeah. These, like, just the front and back facades, does it seem unusual to you at all that it's just one solid surface? There's no mid-band or flare or anything, or is that?
I mean, I think it's more common for there to be a trim board at least between the upper story and the first story, but I feel like for sure if there was a break in the material that would be needed, but I don't know.
It's not something that stuck out at you, really.
Not really. I mean, more so sticks out at me when there's a structure this size and there's not very much fenestration on one side or another. And so in that way, the one, I guess it's the north elevation feels a little bit vacant to me, but at the same time, I think it's just the stairway that's within that space. So, and it's, you know, facing interior to the lot.
the backside is facing interior to the lot, or it's
This-
facing?
The north
window.
side is facing the back lot line. So it's facing. The bottom left is
Yeah.
facing away from the house, so.
Right, away from
yeah,
the house,
yeah.
yes. Okay, yeah, okay. I
Yeah,
just-
so I mean, you know, you obviously, that alley is a city-maintained alley, so it's like, it's utilized, but I feel like there's a lot of structures on that alley that
Yeah.
look and feel very much like accessory structures that don't have,
Absolutely.
you know, a
yeah.
ton of windows and doors, so. Yeah, well, and also like secondary uses, you know, a lot of times people are just building a place to store their, maybe back when, a carriage or their horse or whatever. You're not like thinking about necessarily decorative things so much as.
I
you-
agree.
Did you get your answer on the retaining wall?
I did,
Okay.
yes, that was in the minute, so I got that clear, and I think we also just, unless I missed it, and I'll let
It's the
Donald,
door,
the pedestrian door
lighting.
within the porch, I think, is the one we're still missing.
any other questions for Alex? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Now we'll call up the applicant to come and tell us about their project.
All your drawings and stuff are here, but if you want to use my presentation.
I just emailed you the electrical plan, which had the lighting locations, but I can also articulate it verbally if that's, but did a screenshot off my shot off my phone and send it to you. There's basically two sconces that flank the double door.
Go ahead and introduce yourself so we
Sorry,
have
my
it
name
on.
is Donald Nicholson. I represent the applicant. I think that is the west facade where the double doors are. There is two sconces, one on each side of it. And then the third sconce is in the south face there where the door is on the side. So there are three sconces on the structure, exterior sconces.
Okay, you said there was one in the, on each side of the door, okay, and in the porch.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
To the right or left of the door?
One sec. To the right.
That was my guess. I was going to guess that. How, anybody else guess right? We should have a little side bet. No, we shouldn't. So you've trimmed the doors from 2 to 4 or 3 to 4? There were more doors on the west.
They were wider. We
Gotcha.
dropped down to
Okay.
a 8-foot opening.
All right. And this, thank you for providing the slide we're not on, and that was very helpful. Do you have more comments?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
You're probably right. Questions for the applicant?
On the west elevation, you changed from carriage doors to sliding or French glass doors?
French glass doors, correct.
So what motivated that? Because the original ones look more appropriate, don't they?
They don't plan to actually park a vehicle in the unconditioned space. And so it made more sense from a building envelope perspective and from a light perspective to go to, they're wide enough you could get a vehicle through. But since we postponed and we had this meeting, they thought that was a more appropriate solution for how they wish to use it. That's why we changed that. We can obviously change back to the original, but we felt that was better for how they plan to use the space. So that's why it was changed, and we were hoping to get approval for that.
So the ones that are in, I'm somehow looking at the original drawings, were those hinged to swing out or swing in?
No, that's like an overhead door
Uh-huh. So
versus
still
these actually swing.
the glass ones swing?
Yeah, they're older. They wanted something that was a little more user-friendly. So these are just 2 4-foot wide French doors, so to speak. French garage doors. I don't know if you,
This might not be a viable idea, but would you consider like putting a more carriage-looking appropriate door on the outside of those doors and like that it can slide or something? Because I agree with Commissioner Humphrey that knowing that those are like super wide glass French doors, I don't know that
so I
looks
think,
appropriate, but.
did this, sent over the specs. Is anything like that on this file so we could pull up the actual profiles?
For those glass doors, I don't think I didn't see the glass unless they were in the application. I don't know, it's not there.
When we resubmitted, we attempted to put all specs, detailed specs in.
Yeah, I don't see it in the document that we
Okay.
have.
Okay.
Yeah, I
It
was
does
seeing
show-
the old
So you have
ones.
some sort of like mullion pattern on it, or do you mean like like, tell me more specifically, how'd you like to see them?
I was just imagining a way that if you wanted to have those glass doors for like light purposes, that, you know how they make those barn doors that kind of slide that look like carriage doors? I was just trying to think of an idea that from the exterior, it still looks like a carriage door, you know, if they closed it over the glass doors, but that may, like I said, that may be more expensive and not getting at what your client wants, but it was just an idea of how they might be able to keep the glass doors to open them whenever they want to. But
When you say barn door, do you mean traditional barn doors or like contemporary where they slide
Either one.
horizontally? Okay, because we would need to be proper doors.
yeah.
Acting as like a shutter over the glass
That-
doors? Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking, but again, it may not work from a construction
It's like,
standpoint.
oh,
I'm
it's
just-
like a shutter. Okay,
Yeah.
I wasn't following.
Yeah.
Well, that's sort of interesting. I can't comment on it. I mean, we definitely want to get approval this time, so that is an interesting idea. I wish they were here to say yay or nay to that.
I think the solid glass doors might be incongruous with the neighborhood and alley on a new structure, because you have these, what are those, 6-panel lights above the doors now? And then to have, and plus the windows have a lot of, what is that, 12/1?
That's what the main house has.
Yeah. So I think what staff and Commissioner Humphrey is getting at is something that's more in a line with typical garages on that street. But maybe I'm not, anyway, I don't think solid glass would be appropriate for that. But I'm looking, I didn't know that was this, so I'm kind of looking, scrambling.
Glass or just half glass?
I wish I had the spec sheets would specify that. I would, so I don't know, I don't want to misrepresent. And I know that we're calling it a garage, and I understand why. They are calling it
Yeah,
a studio space, like unconditioned studio space. So the intent is not to necessarily represent that a vehicle goes through there. It can. It's an 8-foot opening. And so they were sort of looked around at doors that were allowable, and there are mostly full glass doors in the district. But having said that, like I said, we need to get approval this go around. So we will fall back on the other ones if that's what it takes to get approval, the ones that was submitted last time.
And those were garage rolling back
It was a
door.
roll.
One,
Overhead door, so it,
And
it was a carriage style.
Right, and the overhead doors, you can get electric button to open it. So,
Yeah, it has, yes.
It's got some mechanical
It-
additions that have to be
It's-
managed and
yes.
maintained, but, yeah.
It's, for how they'll use the space, this would be a better way to do it, but as I
I think
said,
their primary entrance is on that porch, right?
well, it's like a studio, so they like bring, she's a jeweler,
Gotcha,
and she like
gotcha.
brings things in and out, I guess. That's why they're building it. That's her profession, and that's gonna be her studio.
Yep.
Any other major changes since the last time?
No, that was the only one
And
that I can remember.
did you run, we talked last time about coming up with some kind of a calculation that was like kind of total volume of the structures. Did you try to do that? I just asked out of curiosity.
It's funny how a month feels like a really long time, in particular this past month. I think that we did, and we had some talking with Alex, and she sort of was like, it's not necessarily really about that, because that's somewhat driving to a definition that we do not wish to use as the definition, because scale is not that word. So it doesn't say volume, it says scale. And so somewhat we backed away from that approach.
Yeah, okay, fine, I have no. Is there- Are we changing it back to a carriage door, or are we approving it with staff leeway on the door?
I think that's up to the commission to decide. I just gave
Are
my
you
comments on
comfortable-
what I thought about, what I think it would be more appropriate for it to have a true, like,
Carriage door.
carriage
Yeah.
door.
What if it was
a-
like, had, like, divided
Divided
glass,
glass.
like? Some sort of, pattern on it of,
Yeah, I think if you could just make it a more appropriate glass door.
okay.
Yeah, just make it more
I mean, you can get
historically-
aftermarket, I mean, there's definitely ways to dress it up, I guess is,
But not clip-in. They have to be physically divided lights, I think is in the,
I thought it had to be, what type of divided light does,
Simulated divided. light.
simulated, yeah, okay, yeah.
So you're talking just like a 15-light French door?
Whatever the commission would like to see, I
15,
think that would be
16.
something that brings both objectives together.
I think it'll be driven by the windows around it, and I think that can be staff approved. So maybe if there's temperature on the commission to approve, with staff approving the final lights on the west entrance to the ADU.
When you say lights, you mean the
window panes.
Window panes.
But we're still fine with it being a full glass, like top to bottom.
I think those doors usually have a base on them.
Bottom rail.
Bottom rail.
Yes.
And I think that, if that's the preference of a commissioner and other commissioners, I think if that's stated in the application, or the certificate of appropriateness.
Definitely has a bottom and a top rail, I just don't know how thick they are.
Or,
I just want to also ask if the clients have thought about privacy, if they have an all-glass. I mean, building is almost right up on the alley, and people, they don't just drive by in a zooming speed. I know I walk my dog past there, and all the other structures that are up against there have privacy. Some of them have fences, and some are, have more solid opening, doors. Are they gonna want cart?
They
I mean, people
preferred the light over the privacy. And it's not, it's a studio space, so it's not.
She won't be in her pajamas.
There you go. Well, she might be, but she's,
But if
that
she's
can
also
be
dealing
staff
with-
approved, pajama wearing. I don't think that has to come to the commission, pajamas. Well, then, is there a delicate motion? Wait, I think we're going to close, we're done with you, and we're going to open the floor for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to close the floor to public comment. Commissioners, is there further comment? Or is someone prepared to make a motion?
I can.
Okay.
Chairman, based upon the evidence presented to this commission, including Exhibit A, application and project description, 3 pages, Exhibit B, site plans and elevation drawings, 4 pages, Exhibit C, owner affidavit, Exhibit D, new construction worksheet and materials list, 5 pages, Exhibit E, window and door specifications, 5 pages, Exhibit F, additional material specifications, 20 pages, Exhibit G, brick, stone, and wood shake material images, 3 pages. Exhibit H, photographs, 4 pages. Exhibit I, property card added by staff November 25th, 2025. Exhibit J, updated application, 2 pages, received December 17th, 2025. Exhibit K, updated site plans and elevation drawings, 20 pages, received December 17th, 2025. Exhibit L, lighting plan, 19 pages, received December 17, 2025. Exhibit M, massing models, 8 pages, received January 5th, 2026. And Exhibit O, lighting,
We already had the electrical plan in our.
okay. And the commission's actual inspection and review of subject property by all members. I move that this commission approve the certificate of appropriateness based on the following. 1, that the application is for construction of a 1.5-story, 1,085 square foot accessory structure with stone veneer foundation, painted pebble dash and wood shake siding, and certainteed landmark asphalt shingles in colonial slate color. Windows will be Marvin aluminum clad 12/1 and multi-light casement SDL in wineberry color. Pedestrian doors will Reeb wood multi-light over panel and multi-light French doors. Entry on south elevation will be set within an engaged porch with wood flooring, steps, ceiling, and handrail matching primary structure. Structure will have painted wood brackets at roof overhangs matching primary structure. Site work including removal of 1 12-inch DBH cherry tree, construction of brick walkway between primary structure and new accessory structure, construction of a 12-foot long by max 18-inch tall stone veneer retaining wall, and installation of 28-inch by 37-inch by 15-inch mini split unit adjacent to east elevation of new structure. Ground cover must be established within 15 days after completion of construction, and the remainder of landscaping must be installed within 3 years. If archaeological resources are discovered during site work, work will cease until city staff have been notified and have inspected the site. All work will be completed in accordance with approved and attached drawings and plans. All permits, variances, or approvals as required by law must be obtained before work may commence. 2, that the standards for carriage houses, garages, and accessory structures found on pages 34 and 35, landscaping and trees on pages 40 and 41, lighting on pages 42 and 43, walkways, driveways, and off-street parking on pages 50 and 51, fences and walls on pages 36 and 37, archaeology on pages 32 and 33, and utilities and mechanical systems on pages 82 and 83 of the Montford Historic District Design Review Standards adopted April 14, 2010, and amended December 11, 2019, were used to evaluate this request. This application does meet the design standards for the following reasons. A proportion of new accessory structure is compatible with the proportion of the primary structure in terms of height, footprint, and massing, and is no more than 30% of the main house and not taller than 1.5 stories. B, new accessory structure is sited in a location so as to be in keeping with the historic pattern in terms of relationship to primary structures, traditional location of ancillary buildings, orientation, setback, retention of green space, and spacing between structures. C, new accessory structure has a traditional roof form, materials and details compatible with the main building. D, new mechanical unit will be inconspicuously located and screened with shrubs. E, retaining wall will be constructed of stone veneer and will be sited in locations that are compatible with the traditional historic relationship of walls and walkways to historic properties in the district. F, walkway will be constructed of brick and is compatible with the site and district in terms of dimension, configuration, materials, color, and texture. G, tree being removed is leaning. Replacement tree will be the same or similar species from the Montford recommended species list. 4, that the action improvements proposed in the application before us for a certificate of appropriateness are congruous with the special historic character of the Montford Historic District.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Scobie, seconded.
Based upon the foregoing, don't we need to vote?
Oh, I'm sorry. It has been a long time since December. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Which doors are we approving?
It's staff approval of a divided light,
Multi-light French doors.
French doors.
multi-light French door. So, keep reading.
You're opposed?
Yeah, I'm looking at page 35, number 8, says we're supposed to use traditional materials and details on accessory structure. And that's not, in my opinion.
I guess it would be helpful for you to express that before the motion starts next time, so that there's opportunity for discussion. Anyway,
I agree, I'm sorry.
that's okay.
Based upon the foregoing findings and for the reasons set forth therein, I move that a certificate of appropriateness be issued with the following conditions. 1, exact light fixture specifications and pedestrian door specification for door on south elevation will be submitted for staff review and approval. Revised door specifications for French doors on west elevation will be submitted for staff review and approval.
On the south elevation, I'm just reading, the French door is on the west elevation. Okay, all in favor? Oh, is there a second? Second from Mays. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Wait, did you say yes and approve on the first and then no on the second?
So why did we have a second vote then that added this door section to it? Because like to the door section, I agree with the,
It's actually just a procedural thing. I think the first one is
Yeah.
the motion to say what it is we're,
Approving, and then the second one is for the conditions.
yeah, we probably should have had more conversation then.
All right, so I think the motion passed, and we'll say 1, 2, 3,
Go ahead and, yeah.
5 to 2?
Yeah, that's
Okay. All right, and that's it, I think, for that item. Thank you very much, Mr. Nicholson, and Alex will be in touch, I'm sure.
The next item is super simple. 255 Cumberland Avenue. Real quick, just a slide to orient folks to where we are. The yellow dot is the property, subject property, and then, of course, front and side elevation photo. Some of you probably remember that we reviewed a couple of different things on this property recently. And this elevation might look familiar to you, but what we're talking about today are the two windows that are on this little non-original bump out that's on the northeast corner of this house. The two existing windows are not original, as you could probably tell, and they would like to modify the opening and replace them with two new wood windows. And you'll see the rendering down below. I did reach out to the applicant to ask, because it looked like to me all the windows in this house that are double hung are 12/1 windows. And so I was asking if there were any existing 9/1 windows, and there are not. So they sent us a revised spec for the 12/1 windows. So I'm not noting any concerns, and I'm supportive of the proposal.
Questions for staff? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll now call the applicant up to tell us about their project.
You're welcome to just use my slide deck, or if you want to, you've got all your documents here, whatever's helpful to you.
My name's Griff Gamble. I'm representing the clients. Do you just want me to read the description here? Or do you guys have already all read that?
I think we've read it.
So yeah, it's basically just what Alex said. Those two windows are some vinyl windows stuck in that place at some point. And yes, everything is 12/1. I made that mistake. I quoted a 9/1, but now we have a 12/1. They'll go in the same opening right there. All the trim will go back in this existing. The trim does not match the historic trim details, but we will go back and match the historic trim detail when we install these windows.
Any questions for the applicant? I think we're good.
Cool.
All right.
Thank
You
you.
can have a seat, and we're going to open the floor for public comment. Anybody here to, a lot of looking away. I'm going to close the floor for public comment. Commissioners, any comment on this item?
I don't have any discussion about the windows, but I will just flag that this was the house that applied for Tesla solar panels, a Tesla roof, and it has been installed, so you can go by and see it.
It's invisible-ish.
I think it looks, well,
Okay.
I drove by it several times before I noticed it.
I had to go back and then look at it too,
I was
so.
gonna say, I went by there today and I didn't notice it. Now I'm gonna have to go back and see.
You'll pick up your sign.
I'm not picking up the sign.
All right. Any more comments?
Chairman, based upon the evidence presented to this commission, including Exhibit A, application 7 pages, Exhibit B, project description 2 pages, Exhibit C, owner affidavit, Exhibit D, window specifications 3 pages, Exhibit E, photographs 2 pages, Exhibit F, 1951 Sanborn map added by staff December 18, 2025, Exhibit G, Google Street View added by staff December 18, 2025, Exhibit H, revised window specification 3 pages, received January 13, 2025, and the commission's actual inspection and review of the subject property by all members. I move that this commission approve the certificate of appropriateness based on the following. 1, that the application is for replacement of 2 non-original vinyl windows on east elevation, modification of existing openings, and installation of new ganged pair of Marvin Ultimate TDL 12/1 wood windows. All work will be completed in accordance with approved and attached drawings and plans. All permits, variances, or approvals as required by law must be obtained before work may commence. 2, that the standards for windows and doors found on page 84 and 85 of the Montfort Historic District Design Review Standards adopted April 14, 2010, and amended December 11, 2019, were used to evaluate this request. 3, this application does meet the design standards for the following reasons. A, windows being replaced are not original or historic. B, new windows will be wood and compatible with the overall design of the building. 4, that the action and improvements proposed in the application before us for a certificate of appropriateness are congruous with the special historic character of the Montfort Historic District.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Mays. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say no, nay.
Based upon the foregoing findings and for the reasons set forth therein, I move that a certificate of appropriateness be issued.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Mays. All in favor?
Aye.
Any against? All right, that passes. Thanks a bunch for coming in, and good luck out there. Thank you.
Okey-dokey, the last two items I'm going to present together, actually, even though they're two totally different sites, they're both part of a Helene recovery scope of work that are being covered by the same consultant. So, and they kind of cross over with each other in terms of the proposed material. So I'm going to start with the wall at Riverside Cemetery. If you're looking at the parcel map, obviously that's the entire cemetery site. And then on the right-hand side where the wall is identified within that red rectangle, it's on the very far eastern side of the cemetery, it's basically the wall has pretty much collapsed into private property like the last parcel on Birch Street at the end of the street there. So hopefully you were able to get by there. If not, here's a couple of photos of left existing wall that's still somewhat intact, and then there's the portion of the collapsed or failed portion of wall on the right-hand side. This wall, it's important to note, of course, backs up to cemetery land, so there may or may not be burial sites on the other side of the wall. This wall is about 80 feet long. I don't know the exact dimension height-wise at its tallest point, but it's a decently sized wall and really could benefit from being an engineered wall. If they rebuilt it out of federal dollars,
money,
so
okay.
pretty much everything the city is doing right now from a recovery perspective is requiring Section 106 review. Let's see, I'm going to jump over to the park real quick, and then we can jump into the proposed materials. So this is the park site. There's a couple of different sections of wall right in this general area adjacent to the tennis courts or the pickleball courts, whichever they really are anymore. But the portion of wall that's proposed to be repaired is on I guess that's the west side of the tennis courts. And it looks like there's also, and I added some additional photos to the file today at the request of Commissioner Mays. There's also another section of wall that's partly failed that I didn't see included in this scope, and so I would like for the consultant to clarify if that was damaged before the storm or what is that part of the scope. To my knowledge, it's not. My pictures today weren't super great because it was a little gloomy and dark out there, but let's see. It's the section of collapse wall that's not included in this scope is way down there in my photo. I thought I got closer to it. There
Yeah,
it is.
maybe walk a little closer next
Yeah,
time.
I was feeling kind of lazy today. No, that's it right there. Let's see. Then their photos of the wall that's included in this scope these are the photos that they included with their application. As you can see, this wall is sort of similar material appearance in some ways to the wall at the cemetery. My thought on this wall is it's different because, like, I think technically for both walls, they could reuse existing materials or, use like-for-like materials. However, it may be that the commission could support a veneer wall at the cemetery being the structural issues and the burial site issues there that are at play versus the park where we don't have the same kind of things to consider and it's,
Hopefully.
I'm sorry?
Hopefully.
Hopefully, right? But the wall is not nearly as tall, so, and so I think that, at the very least, the park wall should be rebuilt as it was exactly, or, reusing the existing material to the extent possible, then matching what's out there. If you read my staff report, and I noted this to the team that normally we would review wall repair, rebuilding administratively via minor work, but because the proposed materials are pretty far off from what's out there today, I said I'm not comfortable approving this at staff level. If you want to continue down this path and get feedback from the commission, we can go the major work route, so that's why we're here today. So these are the materials that they've put forth for the veneer options. I don't really think any of these look close personally to me to what's out there. And then they're also proposing a cap on the wall, which looks very formal to me.
Both walls?
I believe so, but I'll let the applicant clarify on that. It was kind of a little bit confusing when we were kind of trying to dissect the applications. They looked pretty similar, or had duplicate information, but this may not have been in both. But at the very least, at the cemetery site. And then these are the natural stone options that were provided to us. I tend to think maybe the one in the middle has kind of like the most natural appearance, but both walls seem to have, the wall at the park had more of a mix of color, I thought, versus the wall at the cemetery seemed to be more browns. And I'm sure that the cemetery wall was probably native stone, because I'm assuming it's older than the park walls. And so I'd be interested to know if there's a way that we could figure out where that stone came from and looking at those options. This is a new frontier for me in terms of like having to contend with the cemetery aspect and the wall aspect at the same time. So again, if there's a veneer material that matches more closely, I would support the veneer if you all are inclined to support that option. It's definitely not going to look like the wall that's out there now, but it may just be kind of where we are.
Is the cemetery wall visible from the street?
It's probably not in the summertime. It might be right now. We had to enter private property to go look at it. Like back in the summer, it was like 1,000 degrees the day we went out there, and it was very jungly, so I know you couldn't see it from the street then.
Yeah, I went to the end of Gray Street, and it was, I thought that's the wall, but there was no wall there. So I thought, well, maybe it's gone. Then I came home. The picture is fine. It's old to show the
I was just
the
saying
spillage.
that in terms of, maybe we can be a little bit more flexible if it's not, there's obviously, the park is
Not yet.
very visible, but this is not. Now, obviously, if the homeowners have a serious concern, then, but if it's not a publicly visible element of the neighborhood, maybe we can be a little more flexible.
Just a point of order, that I do know that the cemetery existed before Montfort does. So it is more, if that is original to the cemetery, it is older than the park.
Oh, sure. It's
Yeah,
definitely older than the park walls.
for sure.
Well, just because it's in the cemetery doesn't mean it's as old as the cemetery, but.
That's true.
Any other question? Oh,
Sorry, the other thing to think about with the wall is that there are going to be like 4 trees that have to come out. So that's another thing to think about is like if they have to excavate more, we might be talking about more trees. The other thing I noted in my staff report for this one, just because I don't want it to get lost in the shuffle, is that there's that chain link fence along the top of the wall. And I just want to make sure that we know how long that section is, because I'm assuming that's also going to need to be replaced. So,
replaced with the same, probably.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they would have to have a fence there for safety reasons.
but chain link.
Yeah. And I think I have to look at the standards, the way that they read there. I think it says rear property line, something or other. I'll dig that out while you guys are.
Questions for Alex? All right, we're going to hear from the applicant next, and then we'll have it open for public comment, too. So the applicant, come up, introduce yourself, and tell us about your 2 projects.
How are you? Good. I don't know if you want to use my slide deck, but all your documents
Hi, my name is Patrick Haramaya. I'm with Remington and Vernick Engineers. We were hired by the city of Asheville through a public process to help restore the two sites following the hurricane damage. So just one thing that I wanted to clarify, the existing walls, so essentially they're just stacked stones. A long time ago, before we have the sophisticated software that we have today, stones were stacked and they were crowded together, and for a long time they performed very well, but there's no way to really understand like what their structural properties are. So essentially we have two options here. We can either create something behind the wall that would have structural properties and then restack the stones as decorative, or we can create a new wall that's a concrete wall that would have a stone veneer. So essentially you're replacing the wall with something that has structural properties and a stone covering, or you're restacking the stones with something structural behind it. So what we're proposing to do is, because of the location of the grave sites, the cost, the access, is to replace it with a concrete retaining wall with a stone veneer matched to the existing stone, if that makes sense. I have a...
Which of your samples is a match?
So, we went through and just provided a few examples of some veneer options. And these were four that we selected. We felt that natural granite cladding was the closest, but there's many different types that we could look at. These were just a sample. I think, one thing that we'd like to work towards is, an approval on the wall type, and then working under staff approval to get the actual veneer selected. That would be, something we'd like to work towards.
Okay. So our role is to approve something. I'm trying to figure out how that works if we're,
Are you looking for us to approve something, or just to provide feedback to then come back with a
That was my recommendation.
design?
That's my recommendation, is for you to give them feedback on what they're proposing so that they can go take that information and.
I think your structure behind a restacked, especially in the park, I think to myself sounds, using the existing stone that's there and tipping it back up, and breaking it up, would help match that whole length better. And that's something you're willing to do, right? For the park one?
It's something we could do. It's definitely a more expensive option. You'd have to essentially drive sheet piles to stabilize the earth. Anything over 3 to 4 feet is considered a structural wall versus like a decorative, right? 3 to 4 feet tall. It's not like a 1 or 2 foot wall could be considered like a decorative retaining wall. Once you go above 3 or 4 feet, and the one at the park is about 4.5 feet, it's considered a structural wall. So you would essentially need to support it separate from just stacking the stones.
Right, that's the structure behind it, with
Right.
the stone stack. And is this including the pony wall behind it, further up the hill?
No, that was existing. We were told it was an existing wall that was damaged prior
Okay.
to Helene. So that's totally separate.
Sorry, Commissioner May, go ahead. Mays?
If I read that application correctly, and that section of wall that you want to replace down by the tennis court, maybe one of the problems also is there is a section of it that's pretty tall, maybe taller than 4.5, and it's leaning forward.
It's
So
bowing
you
out.
probably are going to have to take that down and fix it also. You're going to have to take
Right.
more wall down.
One of the things that we're looking at is, although only part of it collapsed, we're trying to work with the city and FEMA to actually get them to replace a much larger section or the whole wall, because it really acts as one system.
Yeah, okay. Well, my comment on at the park was just gonna be that there is, you can't quite see it from the pictures, but there's two walls. And they kind of start close together, down by where there's a new access, handicapped access to the park. But then the one goes towards the tennis court, and that's the shorter one that you're talking about replacing all of. And then the other one runs the whole length of the, up to the west side of the park. And it would be, I think, we would want to avoid a result where we have two walls that don't match. And so you kind of have to do, something. Now, I think those walls were probably built to accommodate some features that are long since gone from the park. Because there was a time when there were fountains, and then there were playgrounds and a stage and different things. So I don't know that they serve, if they're as necessary as they once were, but if you were just gonna rebuild one of the walls and otherwise leave them in place, it seems like they should look the same as much as, they should be as identical as they can be.
Well, and I just want to go back to the cost thing real quick. I was hoping that Tracy, our project manager for this, from our Parks Department, I kind of assumed she might be here, but again, the FEMA money is for restoring to pre-storm conditions, so, and obviously the commission can't consider cost anyway. So you can just give your feedback based on what the design standards say, which say, replace in kind any portion of a historic wall that is damaged or deteriorated beyond repair, match the original in design, configuration, texture, material, and color as closely as possible. So,
Yeah.
And I agree, if this was just a private individual with their home, we would hold them to that. Just because it's the city, we can't necessarily make accommodation, right?
well, I mean, I guess my point is about the funding too, is it's not like that, I mean, FEMA, what's
Very
required
specific.
is what the pre-storm condition was, the
And it should
historic
be-
condition of the wall, and they
Right.
have to comply with the standards, and that's. But again, I could get my head around, I think, a veneer for the cemetery wall in some way, even though we think that wall's probably older, only because of the more complicating factor of the excavation that would be needed into the actual cemetery itself. But that would be with the caveat that there be a veneer that would even get close to what's the appearance out there, and I'm just not sure that exists. I've not seen too terribly many veneers that didn't look like.
They do, this is totally, well, something just to, as part of your brainstorming, they do have these products where you actually pour a concrete block, the kind of blocks that they set to build these stacked walls. But on the top of the block, the last thing you do is set stone into it, so that when it's cured and you turn it on its side, it looks like a stone wall, but it's actually a block this big. So that might be the kind of thing that you could
That's
look into.
essentially what we're proposing. It's a cast-in-place concrete wall, so they would, pour a concrete wall on site, fit to the dimensions, and then we would be, inserting stone veneer into it. It's not full-size stone, but it's a thin
Yeah,
stone that
It's
would,
been cut on one side,
right,
right.
to be.
What
You
prevents
can't fool everybody with that, though.
you from reusing, for materials and just reusing as much of the stone as possible in that process, though? Why does it have to be? I'm just not sure why we can't stack the stones and reuse these stones so that it actually matches in front of the concrete.
If you were gonna use, sorry, you
Yeah.
can do that.
For a concrete wall?
I suppose, what would it take to, without necessarily going into the cemetery side, would it take eminent domain of space to come into the private home section to build out an extra foot or whatever to do the veneer with the original stone?
To do a veneer with the original stone, you'd have to take the original stone and saw it flat on one side.
Right, so we can't stack it, because you mentioned something about taking the original stone and stacking it in front of whatever support we put there, right? Or we have to do the concrete with the veneer. It's one or the other.
Yeah, because it would probably be the space. You wouldn't have both the space for a full concrete wall and then the stacked stone. We don't have a lot of space between where the existing, retaining wall is and then the cemetery and the grave sites. So
Right.
something thin that you could use as sheet piling to just create a thin structure behind it. You would probably have to come onto the private property or use some of the private property for this wall or go back into the cemetery. And that's why that site's really challenging.
And so we don't want to have to take over anybody's private property, so we don't want to dig into any graves, obviously.
Right.
And there's a lot of that space down there they have used as pauper graves, I know. So they don't really actually even know like where bodies are in a lot of the cemetery.
And, even the reason why we'd like to go with the veneer over like a sheet pile and stacked stone is because, even just to get equipment in there, you'd have to get big equipment in there to drive these sheets down into the ground. And, we would already be affecting the property owner, but it would be, just that much more tree removal, and the access there is really difficult.
Yeah.
So may I ask specifically, what's the difference, the depth of the original stone wall and the depth of, or thickness of either your two options?
I don't have that off the top of my head. They just got these large stones and stacked them up. I don't have the
Right,
measurements.
so let's just say if the originals are maybe 16 or 18 inches deep, and they just have soil behind them, right?
Most likely.
And so your new one would be how thick is the poured concrete? Like 12 inches?
Maybe 12 to 16.
And then your veneer, so you're really only adding less than 2 feet to the depth of the wall, to the thickness of it.
Right.
I mean, you'll have to dig to get behind you pour with forms up against the dirt, or do you pour against the dirt with a form on the front?
You'd have form behind and in front. Mhm.
Do you have any examples of what you're talking about of if we are requiring that you do the stacked stone, what that stability will look like on the other side?
By itself, are you talking about?
Yeah, because you were saying if we are going to do the decorative, like the stacked stone would just be decorative. So what does it look like on both sides? Are we stacking it decorative on both sides?
So you would essentially have, a sheet pile that would, be creating this barrier between your upper and your lower earth. So you'd have a metal sheet pile, and then the stones would just be stacked up against that, and then filled in with,
There's
dirt and
no,
grout.
there's no
back
two
side.
sides.
Okay.
You've got a high side and a low side, and the stones would be on the low side. And the top of the wall would be
Yeah.
at the high side. So
Okay.
you wouldn't be able to see the back side.
Yeah, okay.
What's the long-term integrity of doing something like that with a stone wall where it sounds like the stones are no longer holding earth back, something else is?
Right. Yeah, the stones in that case wouldn't be, the sheet piles would be holding the earth back.
So
and-
the next time a storm comes through, what happens to that wall?
Well, the sheet piles would be designed to withstand that, where, currently there's no structural design for the
Yeah,
stacked
well, yeah, that's
stone.
kind of what I mean, is like if the stones are no longer the structural element, they're more decorative, what happens
Oh, to the
if there's
stone,
bad weather or?
the stones are more likely to topple in that, because there's nothing, you can't even attach them to anything because you've got the sheet pile there
But
then.
yeah, that's
so-
what I'm getting at, is if they're no longer holding the wall up. So does that mean structurally they're even less stable?
Right, than they are now.
Yeah, okay.
Do we know if these were damaged from like water / like mudsliding, or is this from trees?
We believe a lot of it was from water.
Down by the tennis court, that is water. I mean, that is landslide. And then up above was a tree, but they're not proposing to fix.
Yeah, we didn't see any evidence of like trees falling on them. It seems like it was water and
Not in
landsliding.
the cemetery, trees?
There's a tree up top, but it didn't seem like a tree fell on it, and that's what caused
Okay.
it to start to fall.
Is there a cap that you're proposing for this wall?
So for either option, we'd have to put some sort of cap that could be different or similar to the veneer. one example we showed in the presentation was like a limestone cap, but you could also just take those same veneer pieces and just kind of wrap that up around the top instead. So instead of having like a,
So if it's a structural solution with reusing the stacked stones in front, say the tennis court one, that cap would be,
well, if you're just stacking the stones, then you wouldn't have a cap. It would just be stacked stones. That's how it is now.
Right.
It's just, the stones just eventually stop, and that's the top.
okay.
Peter, sorry if you answered this already and I just missed it, but what's the max height of the wall at the cemetery?
From FEMA's measurements, they said it's 6 feet, and we generally, saw that was consistent. We didn't measure the entire length, but it's about 6 feet.
I have one more question. When you're repairing the wall, whichever way that you do it, well, I have two questions. I'm thinking about the ends where it ties into what's existing and not damaged. You have a plan for that? Does the retaining wall just end flat, or do you like go behind what's still got integrity, or how do you envision tying into the other wall? And then the existing wall that still has integrity. And then my other question is, do you have contractors that are familiar with historic stonework? Because there's a lot of stone walls in Montfort that have been rebuilt that are not very good. Mm-hmm. And it's probably based on price. I know all construction projects are driven by price, at least in the top three. And that's the thing I worry about the most.
Yeah, unfortunately, the way that the public bidding laws that we have to abide by are lowest qualified bidder, and by qualified, it just means that they hold a license in,
City's approved.
right. So once someone's approved as a licensed contractor, they can bid on the work. We can, have.
You can't reject them if they're the ones that win the bid?
The city could reject all the bids, so they could say, we're just not awarding it. They can't reject one and take the next if they're the low bidder, but they could just reject all the bids and put it back out.
That's flawed.
Another thing we could do is, we don't have to invite everyone if it's under a certain dollar threshold, so there are ways to.
We don't have to get into the subcontractors on this yet.
Sorry, Will.
That's all right. I know where you go.
I have another question. We haven't circled to the mature trees yet that are going to get removed. What is the plan? Is there any plan to replace those? I haven't heard anything about that. Obviously, that makes a huge difference on the cemetery wall. A big part of being able to have some of that privacy there is those big trees that have existed for so long. So I would like to hear more about that.
Okay, so when we were hired, it was actually, those trees were supposed to be removed by the city. So we don't personally have any plan to do anything with them. So I will have to defer to the
A
city's
different
project.
application would come in for that, probably. Not your problem.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the
Okay.
city's handling it on their own, like through their own staff, or,
I think staff will check in on it.
okay.
About the trees?
The city doesn't apply to itself for tree removal permits, so usually the city arborist just lets me know whenever they need to remove a tree.
I'd like it to apply to me for approval.
That day, we're going to go with
But
the,
it's my understanding that the trees are there's no way to replace the wall without taking out trees, so. It's just
Yeah, like the one is sitting directly on top of it.
Yeah, that's just the reality of it, so, I mean.
But is there a plan to plant new ones there, or?
Haven't had that conversation yet, because the city arborist hasn't been part of the project team discussion, so, but we can find that out. They're not required to replant them in the same place, though, and of course, we wouldn't want them to replant them that close to the wall anyway, so.
Do you think it makes a good border, though, for those, for both the cemetery and for the private property owners, so it's something to consider?
Sure, but that's, the design standards don't say, protect your neighbor from X, Y, and Z if you're next to a cemetery, unfortunately.
Not yet.
I don't really have a way to tell them that. We can have that discussion then.
Any other questions for the applicant before I open it?
Does the park wall, is that also going to utilize the sheet piles?
So I guess it'll depend based on the decision of this body. We were planning to do one design for both, but if it needs to be separate for each site, then we can consider that as well.
Yeah, like the access constraints aren't the same, right? Like, you have a lot more freedom of movement at the park versus the cemetery, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you could go with a,
That goes for everybody.
yeah. You could theoretically get an engineer to sign off on like a CMU with a full thickness stone instead of a veneer for that wall. So you, at the park wall, is it possible to use kind of what the other commissioner was saying, the full thickness stone, like salvage that and just use that against a concrete wall because the volume is less. So that would be using the existing stone. Is that a possibility?
I think as long as we could safely restack those existing stones and anchor it so that there's no risk of that falling down.
Yeah, it'd be like type S mortar onto concrete.
Yeah,
Pretty standard practice.
yeah.
Does that have a base under it, the stack stone?
You could pour a concrete footer.
Probably, yeah, concrete or stone footer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, just for the park, there is potential to use that stone that exists already.
Yeah, I think there's potential there.
Okay. I don't have an answer for the cemetery or questions about the cemetery. The access seems super limiting.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, I'm going to open the floor to public comment now.
Thank you.
No, you got to come all the way up. I got to swear you in. It's a process. This is quasi judicial. Let me swear you in first. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the information you present during the certificate of appropriateness before the Historic Resource Commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Helen Robinson, and,
Stay close because,
okay.
all right.
Anyhow, my husband and I own the property on the other side, on the cemetery wall. Like 7 feet of our property is covered in wall right now. And we've been working with Tracy Wyman, and we sort of thought that we were going to be included in this process, and here we see something 53 Birch, which isn't our address, our names aren't on there, and it seems appropriate that whatever happens, we should at least be part of the whatever happens there, because so far, we have a complete mess there, and I'm not going to dictate how to do it, because obviously it has to be like affordable and appropriate. And I mean, it's a long part of the wall, but also it feeds into, it connects with the part of the cemetery wall that hasn't collapsed. I mean, it's a complicated thing, I understand. But I just feel like we should be part of the process. And so far, we have this contract with Tracy that work was going to start not before September 1st, and it was going to be done in 120 days. And here it is. Nothing's happened except somebody went in and cut down a little tree of ours and just threw the branches around. So far, it has not been like the greatest situation. And so I have nothing to offer except to ask that we are included in some way in this process, because we were told that we would be, and it seems like we should be, since that's what we look at. And those trees are coming down. That's going to be our trees coming down. Our property's going to be trampled to do all this work, and it just feels like we should, like it was kind of odd to get this thing where I didn't even know what 53 Birch was. I didn't even know that if this was going to be our wall, So anyhow, so that's just a request that I have.
No,
I'm sorry, I'm not speaking in here. You can hear me too, right? Okay.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing, and we appreciate it. And this commission, of course, is just supposed to look at the design standards for the wall. But obviously, I'm a coworker of Tracy's, and I'm just on the periphery of this project, but I'll let her know that you came today, and we'll relay what your comments so that she can follow up with you and make sure you're looped in, because that's part of her role here, so apologies.
I don't think, I mean, it's all, there's been a ton going on, I understand all that, but and
Yeah.
there's so much happening, but, yeah, just to be included in what it looks like and how the work is gonna take place would be helpful to us, so. that's all.
Sure, is there anything else that you wanted to say?
No, hi, my name's Matt Holloway. I work with Tracy too. I know that the city has been speaking with you about just getting permission to go onto your property and where all that. And I don't want to make excuses, but I think probably one of the reasons that Tracy maybe didn't reach out to you is because at this, it's a very preliminary stage still. And I think we're not necessarily deciding what's exactly going to happen. I think we're really trying to get guidelines from the commission on, all right, here are some channel markers, and then let's zero in from there. But I think it makes sense, and I do apologize that you probably had to find out about this, without being told, and, I apologize about that, but just because you're next door and all, but no,
But it's just like it's on our property and our
yeah.
neighbors aren't there, and it's
It's incredibly, yeah.
And thinking that this work was all gonna be done by December, so it's just, and I
You-
understand that things don't work that way, et cetera.
What was it, 90 days or 120 days? And I was like, that's very optimistic about government efficiency. Nevertheless, I think, sorry you had to come here to have somebody tell you this, but we'll be sure to keep you on
I
the,
appreciate that you guys are listening to me, and it's all great, it's all good, because if
Well-
we could be included, that would be great.
yeah, sure.
Did
Well,
you see the submissions about the design proposals, or?
What do you mean, the stuff we just looked at? Yeah,
That's the first stuff you said. Well, and did you have any comments on that?
no, because I feel like that's really preliminary, and you guys, it'll all have to be a matter of, finances, and I'm not an architect.
Okay.
I just know that I have to look at it, and it was a really nice wall before,
Yeah.
and, yeah. the tree-
And it was about 6 feet tall?
I'd say no, it's much more like 10 or 12 feet tall, from when I'm on the
Yeah,
ground.
looking up.
It's totally flat on top. You see what I'm saying? It's like just a drop. It's not a wall with two sides, it's a total drop.
Okay.
And maybe I don't
Retaining
have
wall.
a great sense of, but it's like up to that knob, at least higher than that knob, like way higher.
Then okay.
Yeah, I don't know how tall it is, but it's definitely more than 6 feet.
Well, your visual description was good, showing us that. And I'm sorry dealing with the city dealing with the process of being slow, but it sounds like you're in the loop now.
Everybody has stuff.
Yeah, and thanks for being understanding for a terrible,
I just
no.
wanted to just find out if this even was our property, I didn't know. So thanks for that, I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks for letting me talk.
Any questions for the, nope. All right, thanks a bunch. So I'm going to close the floor to public comment for now. Commissioners, let's break this up into the park first, and then we'll hit that cemetery. So Commissioner Scobie had mentioned and tell me if I'm not saying it right, a concrete structure with reusing the existing stones to marry in to the non-repaired wall.
Like the goal being to use, if it's a stacked stone, there's maybe 2 or 3 stones being used in the thickness of the wall. If you have a concrete or a masonry, like a cinder block wall behind it or whatever, you only have to use 1 layer of stone.
That's out to about the same.
And so you don't necessarily have to salvage 100% of the stone, you just have less material requirements, is my thought. I'm spitballing here, but it doesn't sound like you have to use a sheet pile, and you have to use the full volume of stone that was used before.
It
Okay.
sounds like then maybe, and maybe this is me jumping way ahead, but that if that's something that they could look into, and then look at, like, talk in their, amongst their team about the feasibility of that, and if that's something that they think is not the best option and want to come back to you to propose something else, and maybe look at other veneer options, then that is one path for that, for the cemetery wall. And then the other one, it sounds like they can rebuild it with the existing material and match what's out there, and that we can move forward administratively via minor work. And we might be able to do the other one minor work too, if it's gonna be able to reuse the material in the method that you described. And so it may not need to come back, but, so I would just say, maybe it's a good idea to recommend that they ask for a continuance, and then maybe it comes back to this body, and maybe it doesn't need to. Does that make sense to you all?
How would it not come back to this body?
Because if
If you have a
they're,
continuance?
because if they, as we assume, can rebuild the wall at the park using the existing materials and match what's there.
Minor work.
That's minor work, and then same with the cemetery wall, if they can rebuild it in the way that Commissioner Scobie is describing, it would still basically look the same. And we could review that via minor work as well.
Okay.
But that, I think they need to kind of go and investigate with their team and figure out with Tracy, the project manager, et cetera. They need to coalesce around that if that's an option. And if not, then they'll need to, and they want to propose a different material, then I would want them to come back to you.
A commissioner who has a different solution or vision for how this should go besides staff's suggestion? Which is?
I guess I just want to make sure I'm very clear on, you're not suggesting veneer, or like we're waiting to hear more about the Riverside Cemetery, like what is potentially possible there?
I just want to make sure, Peter, did you hear what I was saying just now to the commission? Okay, no, that's okay. I want to make sure you hear this. So a couple of things. So for the wall at the park, we know that can, pretty much we're sure that can be rebuilt as is. And so that we could split off and review as minor work, and you wouldn't have to come back to the commission for that wall, if it's the case that you can rebuild it as is. And then with the cemetery wall, if it can be rebuilt in the manner that Commissioner Scobie was describing, where it's still gonna have the appearance of like you're gonna be able to reuse the existing stone, and the actual facade of the wall is gonna look pretty much the same as far as material goes, then that we could also review administratively via minor work, and you wouldn't have to come back for that. But what I think is a good idea for you is to go back to your team and Tracy and talk about what we talked about today, and kind of coalesce around what is feasible, et cetera. And if your team thinks it's not going to be feasible for XYZ reason after all to go with Commissioner Scobie's idea, then you want to propose, an alternative method of construction and material for the wall, then I would think you would want to come back to the commission for that. Does that make sense? Sorry, can you come back up to the microphone? Thanks.
Potentially doing like a full stacked stone at the park. But what was the suggestion at
Just to rebuild it like exactly as it is.
at the cemetery?
And no, at the park. And at the cemetery, I think Commissioner Scobie was describing,
I was only talking about the
oh, you were talking about the park.
Yeah,
I'm
because
sorry,
the-
okay.
Yeah, the cemetery, I have no idea.
Okay.
There's no,
Sorry, I missed that then.
no, you're good. I was only speaking about the park, and I was only speaking about the park using like a portion of the, you could salvage the stone and use it as the veneer if you engineered the wall in an appropriate way, is my thought.
Yeah, I agree. I think at the park, there's a possibility of, using sheet piles and, and then restacking, or I'm sorry, since you have more space there, doing like a concrete wall and then a stacking and tying it into, I think there's a possibility at the park I don't think that possibility exists at the cemetery like we've been discussing.
Okay. Then, I mean, I guess my concern is that none of the veneers are not even close. So I think you need to go back to the drawing board on that and ask for a continuance and come back.
So we approve 123 Montford or
I think that they need to.
345?
I think that it would be helpful to them to talk about it.
Okay,
with
'cause
the
they wanna
team,
try and do it.
And then we can always, if we can go
Okay.
that route, we can review it as minor work. Otherwise, we can just bring it back, so.
Any other comments from commissioners to the applicant while he's here?
Just one very briefly, which is what I see in some of these photos and what I see in sometimes some of the newer walls in Montford is the masons want to make these really thin mortar joints, and that's what makes it look like a new wall. And so to the extent while you're executing this thing, if you can like make them look at the old wall and use just as much, as much mortar as the old masons did, it's kind of a sloppier, faster thing, and they don't want to do it because they consider it sloppy, but that's how they.
Are there examples of newer walls that have been approved within the district that we could look at just for examples?
They're approved before they're built.
They're approved before they're built, yeah.
That house on Chestnut Street that was here for the, not the accessory
on
dwelling.
Cumberland?
On Cumberland, right, that wanted to replace 2 single windows with a double. They have a new laid stone wall.
Okay.
That's what it looks like, a new, like there's tons of Portland in the mortar. It's never gonna look old.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I think that's the reason that it feels like yours is being so, yeah, like, it's because you're still gonna have historic walls right next to it. There's no, like, way that that's not gonna happen, and so trying to use the original stones and trying to make it look as close as it was as possible is really what we're trying to get to, especially since it's going to be right next to old walls in all areas.
But if we can't reuse the existing stones, then it's not going to match 100%. Just want to.
Why can't you use the existing stones, reuse
I
them?
think he's saying
If
in
they
the
can.
cemetery,
If they
maybe
can.
not, but
Yeah, at the cemetery.
I think we would like more options than what is presented, because all of what's presented is really nothing like what's there.
Okay.
So is that okay? Is that all right if you ask for a continuance to come back with some veneer options?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then, do we vote on that? Nope.
One more thing.
I didn't see your hand.
Will. I just want to know if you are willing to propose, as Commissioner Scobie mentioned, a CMU retaining wall, because I think the sheet pile involves so much heavy equipment and invasive process. I think you could like really compact the project, the impact on the whole area. I'm talking mostly about the cemetery, because you didn't propose the sheet piles for the park. The walls aren't that tall.
No.
Anyway, is that an option to just do something that's a little more manual and less giant equipment?
At which location?
Well, at both,
At
but
both.
I wasn't thinking you needed the sheet piles at the park, but maybe you did, and I wasn't paying attention.
I think at the park, the sheet piles would be not only preferred, but maybe necessary because of how much depth we have before we get to the graves. But
That's the cemetery.
That's the cemetery.
at the cemetery, at the park, right? If we're going back with a non, we're not going back with a concrete poured-in-place wall, then we can consider different options for that shorter wall. Yeah.
Well, I hope that you can help the property owner that's adjacent visualize what is actually the impact of the sheet piles, because I don't think any of us can see in our minds how much that's gonna impact. You know,
Yeah.
the process is gonna be a huge impact, huge. Thanks.
So would you like to continue to February?
They'd have to resubmit by next Wednesday. So,
So the submission date for new materials and circling your wagons is Wednesday. So
Okay.
but you can
if you can
request a
get to
continuance
Alex, yeah, if
to
you,
March or whatever you want. It just needs to be to a future hearing date in the near future.
Would it be possible to request February, and if we can't make it, then
Yeah,
push it
that's fine. You
further?
can just let me know, and then we can request another continuance
Okay.
on your behalf.
Because,
well, let me take a quick vote on it. All in favor of moving this to February?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? All right.
okay,
Then I'll circle back with you and Tracy in the
Okay.
next couple of days in the email, and we can get together as needed. to
Okay.
follow it.
all right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a bunch. And thanks for working on this. It'd be great to fix it.
Any other business items? Do you guys want to?
Are you, we talked, at some point, there was some discussion that someone would go to the Montford Neighborhood Association and talk about guidelines, changes. Is that gonna happen this month?
They have not been super clear with me on what they want me to present on. I just got the tentative agenda for the 28th, the meeting on the 28th from Bill Eakins, where they gave me 45 minutes to talk, and I don't have 45 minutes to talk, say, of information to share on the amendments at this point, so.
Just take questions. It'll be
Yeah, that's a great idea. No. No, so I've asked them for clarification, because I do need time to prepare whatever I'm gonna present on, but I am, planning to be there on the 28th, along with, Will's gonna be there, and David Hazard, my, direct supervisor, will be there as well. Last time I presented to them, I gave a whole spiel on just like the role of the commission. There seems to be like kind of constant misinformation about what the process is for getting CAs, so we talked through that. I won't be able to arrange it this time, but last time around, we had Jennifer Cathy from the SHPO come and talk also about tax credits, so that we're not just talking about the regulatory piece of things, we're also talking about, incentives that exist for property owners to take advantage of. And
I thought it was gonna be related to basically what we talked about at that work session that we had by Zoom, which is, here's the amendments that were presented, proposed amendments, and here's what we think about them preliminarily, sort of. I thought the idea was to start the kind of public,
we don't have an engagement plan or anything together yet, so we have to like formalize all that beforehand, so.
oh, I'm just going off of, there was a prior meeting 2 or 3 months ago where you mentioned going to the M&A as part of that process, so if there's something, maybe
No, we were planning to do engagement with the neighborhood. It's just, that's not what, didn't think that's what I was going to the neighborhood association meeting to speak about, like the amendment specifically.
okay.
I'm prepared to share with them like a timeline, because we do have a roughed out timeline for what we think we want to do, which is, what we think we want to do is do community engagement, like probably two community engagement events in like April, like March, April, and then also do a survey in that same time frame, present that information back to the commission in May, and then have you guys take a vote on whatever amendments are on the table in June, is our intended plan. So I'm prepared to share that with the neighborhood association, but I'm not like.
You don't
we
plan to talk
have,
substantively about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
because we don't necessarily like have that quite finalized yet. We wanted to work on the executive committee's meeting next week to work on, we just want to like start a draft make sure we've got the draft red line for additions, kind of where, make sure we don't need to make any other tweaks before we go out to the neighborhood. And we just are gonna talk about fences a little bit more.
Okay.
So yeah, I thought we might be a little farther along than we are before the MNA meeting next week, or the 28th, but we just kind of are still figuring our way out through this thicket of stuff, so.
And the executive committee meetings are,
It's on Tuesday at 9:30, and this one will be virtual, so.
so if somebody wants to join, they just email you for the link.
You can, it's technically for just the executive committee members and staff, but it will be live streamed. I don't know what hours.
Oh, I understood that any member could come to an executive committee meeting.
It's not that, we just have never, like, it's just never been that there was a random commission member that wasn't on the committee that just wanted to come and hang out, so.
Well, when we talked about who was going to be appointed to the executive committee, I made the point that I thought it would be good, since about 85% of our stuff is related to Montford, that somebody from Montford be there. And as part of that discussion, you mentioned that it was, that any member could always come to the executive committee and participate in the discussion. So that's what I'm basing that on.
I mean, I guess if you read the bylaws for the commission, the executive committee has a clear function, and they're elected officers of the commission. So they're the ones that kind of drive policy for the commission and help, you know, with bigger projects and that sort of thing. That doesn't mean that someone from Montford isn't a valuable voice, but it's just that there are 4 existing elected members, so.
Well, okay, so putting aside the way it was represented at the time, what I want to avoid is a situation where we come into a meeting and there are specific proposals that have been made that have already been workshopped and sort of finalized at the executive committee level, and members are just asked to vote up and down on those. Because I have some particularly on the fence thing, I have some very specific, you know, desires for what that amended guideline looks like if it is amended. And the guidelines themselves say that any member can at any meeting propose an amendment to the guidelines. And I don't want the procedures for how we, you know, sort of organize our business to you know, disempower individual commissioners from being meaningfully involved in those discussions. In other words, I think we all should be involved in those discussions, whether we are or not on the executive committee. And however the executive committee meetings are conducted.
But that's why we held the work session in November, was to engage the larger commission. So I guess it feels a little bit frustrating that you're saying that we didn't take that route, because we did.
No, I'm not saying, I'm talking about from here into the future.
Well, we can talk.
It's been said at multiple meetings that I've been at in this commission that members can always come to the executive committee meeting. I just asked you if members could join this one, and you suggested maybe I couldn't, and it wouldn't be appropriate. So what is the?
I didn't mean to imply that it wouldn't be appropriate. It's just that we have a process where the executive committee meets. We have, if you read the bylaws, there's a very specific set of information that committee is tasked with. That's the whole reason why we have that committee. It takes up a lot of staff time to manage a separate committee in addition to this commission. And so we try really hard to kind of let that committee, because they're elected officers, do the work that they need to do, and then come back to the commission if there's something that they need to inform you guys about and get your thoughts on, which is what the work session was for in November. And so now we need to kind of continue down the path of working with the executive committee, and if the executive committee thinks, hey, I think we need to go back to the full commission with X, Y, or Z, then we'll do that. But at this point, we had that work session specifically for the other commission members to weigh in on what the analysis that the committee had done already, so.
And the substance of that analysis was, there were 4 proposals. 2 of those, the executive committee thought we should make some movement on, and 2 not. And on one of those, which was the additions, there was a draft amendment. I had some thoughts on that and the wording of that, but I didn't think it seemed premature to mention it in the work session, where I thought what I just said was essentially the purpose of that meeting. But once you get into the meat of it, well, what are we going to do about fences? What should those guidelines be? What is it that we're going out and getting community support for, or telling the community that, doesn't need to change? I think that, I'm not sure that's been fully workshopped. And it doesn't mean that it has to have been, or that I'm not faulting the past practice. But if I were to come to a meeting and to get, here's the amendment, vote up and down, and that was the extent of my involvement in determining what these new guidelines are going to be for our neighborhood, that would be extremely disappointing.
But that's not what the process is going to be. You can come to any of the engagement sessions. You can also pass along a red line draft to us to share with the committee members if you would like. And then we can talk about it with them and get a better sense of what they feel like is the best way to proceed.
And when you say committee members, you mean executive committee
Yeah,
members?
exactly.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So my point is there will be opportunities. It's not like we're going to ask the commission to vote on this in February and just give you guys, a slate of amendments, just say, that's it. This is not like a cut and dry thing like that. There's going to be opportunities in the interim months for you guys to offer your.
And I think there's
Okay.
quite a bit coming from the community. Is the goal is the 2 outreaches to try and understand
Yeah.
more on how fences aren't working or are working.
Right. Well, my only thing I will add is I've spent a huge amount of time doing research on the fence issue in Montford and compiling materials related to that, old photographs of the neighborhood, old photographs from around the neighborhood. At some point, I'd like the opportunity to show those and give my take on that rule, why it is what it is and what it should be. And so I hope, and I would hope that the whole commission would get the benefit of that, and also any alternative views that other people have, other experts who disagree with me, for example, and that, we have an opportunity for like a real substantive discussion about like what the policy is, what it should be, and how it makes sense before there's a vote on something. And it could be another work session. It could be just something that's made available. But I don't feel like there has yet been really any robust discussion at the full commission level.
Well, we made the decision before you were on the board that the executive committee would be the ones heading this, like making the red lines and making kind of the really detailed changes that we felt like it would be more efficient for the executive committee at the time to be making those decisions. And at that time, that was like a year and a half ago almost, like that, because then Helene and all of this stuff has happened. So it isn't just even the executive committee that's been voted in right now isn't even the same people that initially started this endeavor.
Right.
So, I don't think Alex is even saying that we're all not gonna have engagement on it. Like, I think there's not even gonna be a vote before it's initially presented to Montford, because we do want to know probably their take on what's happening too. I don't think there's anything that's being set in stone right now that should make you feel like you're not gonna have any place in it. Because I think we all wanna hear each other on how everyone feels about it, but at the same time, I don't think it's efficient for 10, 12 members to all be sitting here arguing about something. Like, it almost feels like the 4 is more efficient, but while taking into account what's gonna make the most of majority people happy.
Okay, well, I don't disagree with anything you just said.
Yeah, but I hear your thoughts, and we don't want anyone to feel excluded either. But to Celesta's point, we just have had this way of working with the executive committee because we have to have a way to get things done outside of your regular meetings, because we'd never been able to finish a meeting if we did the work of the executive committee in the same night. And number one, we couldn't do it with the full commission, because then we'd have a quorum and we'd have to have, that would require everybody to commit, whatever. And of course, it is just sometimes with a smaller group, easier to just kind of be a little bit more nimble and kind of move through things a little more quickly. But we want consensus. That's important to us. We don't want what we definitely don't want is to go out to the neighborhood. I mean, we may not all be on the same page about every little detail, and that's okay, but generally speaking, ideally, what we come up with is something that you guys feel comfortable with, saying to the neighborhood, we think this is what's right and what maybe makes the most sense. Now tell us your thoughts on this, so that you guys are operating as a team more or less, and like we all kind of feel like it's a united effort with the neighborhood versus, it being somewhat disjointed or someone feeling like their opinion wasn't heard or whatever. So please feel like we appreciate your expertise too. And I don't know how you got a 70-slide presentation together. Because don't you have kids and a full-time job? But also, 70 slides is a lot, so you might need to condense that a little if you're going to present it to all of us.
Well, we could also do a work session where, it was voluntary, like, come if you want to see these and don't if you feel like you're sold on the issue, or, I suspect that some other people, there's probably some people who have been around the
Yeah,
neighborhood.
we want to be careful about saying we're going to have a voluntary meeting where you can come or you don't, because what if enough show up that it's subject to public notice? And so we want to be careful about that. But it's odd. I don't know, like, just because you're a commission member, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to present your ideas and your research to the commission, right? So I don't, do we just put this on under other business? Or at the same time, as a member of the public, that doesn't, just because you're a commission member, that doesn't mean you get sort of like a captive audience automatically
I agree with that too.
onto the executive committee, because, we got the rules and they say executive committee's for this. So I'm not sure, like, what a good way is but I think there should be a way, right? Because aren't y'all part of this because of your expertise? And, I mean.
We also have, I'm pretty interested in, like, down to the sentence, what every sentence says, particularly in that guideline, so, yeah. I appreciate that, and I'm not asking for an answer right now on exactly what that forum is, and I don't want to force anyone to be my captive audience, but these are really substantive weighty issues. These fences, that is like the most contentious issue in the neighborhood. It has been for the 15 years that I've lived there. It's a life safety issue. People get incredibly upset if cars are screaming down their road in front of them at 60 miles an hour and they can't have a fence.
You don't have to tell me. I've lived in this world of misery for 11 years.
So it is an issue, and I think the approach that's in the guidelines is just entirely wrong from a historical perspective. And so I think there does,
Your gunpowder, you got a show to go.
It merits a really robust discussion at some point. And we don't quite really have the format for that, in between, this application and that application. So I'll leave it there.
Any other announcements? I have a quick one that while we're staying on cemeteries, or I'm going to stay on cemeteries. South Asheville Cemetery and Hood Huggers is having an MLK Workday on Monday, January 19th from 12 to 4, and it includes chili to start it off.
They're working on the cemetery,
It had tremendous tree damage during the storm, and it's very sensitive to get heavy equipment in there, so they're having to pretty much drag it out with small tractor, tiny, narrow things. And so that's what's going to happen. Bring your gloves.
I have a question, and maybe, Jenny, you might know. I got a media request for an interview next week for Riverside Cemetery history specifically, and that is not my bailiwick. And I wondered if you, off the top of your head, if you don't know, but know anybody, we can probably try to figure it out otherwise, but.
Somebody to talk about Riverside's history, because Josh is not here anymore and we don't know how to contact him.
Yeah. Yeah, Sharon Farr's name was passed along to me, and then somebody else who does tours that.
Yeah, I would reach out to the Thomas Wolfe House. They do a lot of tours there about Tom's life specifically, but the people who walk through there know that cemetery better than just about anyone else.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. Always glad to dodge a media request bullet, so deflect them, refer them to someone else.
There was something else, but it doesn't matter. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Then at 5:59, 1 minute under the bell,
Make a motion to close the meeting.
Second.
all in favor? No one is opposed.